Spotify has paid out $40 billion to the music industry. So why is no one happy? Maybe artists and the industry should take a closer look at Apple, who essentially created the fundamental rules of the game in the first place. How so? Well, let's get into it. I'm Elon Osborne, and this is Acoustically Speaking. Spotify recently trumpeted that it has paid out nearly $40 billion to music rights holders since its launch in 2006. That's right, billion with a B, which is an impressive number for sure, but few in the industry were impressed. Artists certainly weren't. In its most recent earnings report, the music streaming leader celebrated 3.17 billion euros, about $3.4 billion, in Q4 2022 revenues and 205 million paid subscribers, representing a free to paid subscriber conversion number of 42%, which Peacock could only dream of having numbers that good, because who subscribes to Peacock, right? I don't know. And yet you didn't find anyone on Wall Street sending gift baskets to Spotify, especially investors. Spotify's stock price is about 1/3 what it was just 2 years ago. Just like Zoom in this post-pandemic economy. Now teachers can once again get sick from seeing their germ-spreading students in person, the way our education system intended. Essentially, no one is happy with Spotify, and here's why. Their dirty little secret is that it's saddled with a pricing and business model that makes it improbable to make artist payments that matter, and practically impossible for it to be profitable. The company achieved its first profitable quarter in Q4 of 2018, a full 12 years after its launch, and has since achieved only a handful of positive quarters. If I told my wife, hey honey, I'm gonna quit my job and start making videos on YouTube, but I'm not gonna make a dime until 12 years from now, she would have signed the divorce papers right then and there. In fact, the more Spotify makes, the more it seems to lose. That happened again in its latest self-described strong Q4 of 2022, where losses dwarfed those just 1 year earlier. Kind of like Instagram models who publish the perfect selfie, but don't disclose the 89 photos they deleted before that perfect shot. Before I move on, let's talk about gross margins. Ew, gross. Yeah, I know, but just hang in there with me. Gross margins are the amount that a business keeps from each dollar after the costs of goods are sold. You with me? So at its core, Spotify's pure play economics simply don't work. Its variable cost structure burdens and its gross margins, in this case regarding the music itself, are simply too thin. The streamer pays out 70 cents of each dollar to rights holders, namely record labels, publishers, distributors, performing rights organizations, and collection societies. And that 70 cents immediately comes off the top without even including Spotify's operational costs like paying employees, marketing, and overhead budgets, etc. In fact, they likely will only get worse over time due to understandable industry pressures. After all, artist rights holders only earn about 1/2 of a cent per stream. That means 1 million streams pay out about $5,000 on the high end, and artists and composers themselves only collect a small share of that $5,000 from the rights holders. Kind of like my Uncle Louie, who used to pay me $5 for delivering powdered sugar to his buddies. Knowing now how dangerous that job was, I should have gotten at least $10. All this means is that, apart from a few mega artists like Drizzy Drake, Spotify and other streamers put little food on the table. Yet in some respects, Spotify shouldn't be seen as the industry pariah it's made out to be. That title should go to Joe Rogan for spreading conspiracy theories and… oh wait. It was Spotify who paid a fortune for exclusivity to the Joe Rogan experience.
You know what? No, screw you Spotify for being such a
Sorry about that, folks. Podcasts are a whole different story. Let's get back to the music, shall we? Spotify entered the music scene with its basic price structure and monetization constraints already in place after 2 cataclysmic events had already disrupted and fundamentally changed music industry economics forever. The first was when 3 6 Mafia won an Oscar in 2006 for their song It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp. Just kidding. The original sin happened, of course, with Napster, which facilitated outright theft. Napster and its users essentially stole twice, both by taking money directly out of the pockets of artists and then by driving down the perception of music's value to zero. The second shoe to drop was Steve Jobs and Apple. In a music industry understandably panicked by Napster's insidious peer-to-peer pilfering, Jobs promised to be its savior. His solution? 99-cent downloads, of course. Remember those? Apple essentially stripped out singles from albums to give consumers, at least those who agreed to pay, precisely what they wanted. Usually that was one hit song from an album of 12 songs. But that's just how it was back in the 90s, for example. You took a risk when buying an entire album on CD. I personally remember buying Stunt by Bare Naked Ladies only to be disappointed that the rest of the album sounded nothing like their hit song One Week, and more like this alt-country rock that I was not prepared for. You did me wrong, Bare Naked Ladies, and I will never forgive you for that.
If only I could have downloaded the single 1 week for a measly 99 cents, then that could have saved.
Of course, Apple profited handsomely with 99-cent downloads, inventing its now notorious near 1/3 share of every dollar that still defined the content rules of the game. Then the iPod was released, enabled by and coupled with Apple's 30% tax, which transformed the company into the $2.3 trillion juggernaut we see today. The New York Times recently called Apple's fees its primary driver of growth. Jobs' sleight of hand essentially shifted billions of dollars away from the artists and creators and into Apple's pockets. And with that 1-2 punch, Napster and Apple laid the foundation for today's industry streaming economics, despite the fact that Jobs never believed streaming would amount to anything. He notoriously said this in 2003, demonstrating that he too is fallible. The subscription model of buying music is bankrupt and couldn't even be saved by the second coming. He simply couldn't conceive that owners would jettison song ownership via downloads for what he called rental via streaming. Can you see where this is going though? In that context, Spotify launched at a price point arguably necessary to compete against the Apple Core, $9.99 per month. Fast forward to today, after faster broadband and processing power fueled realization of streaming's power and potential, we have Spotify on the music side and Netflix on the video side. And there it is, the power of streaming as we know it today. No longer do we own anything for convenience's sake. We would just rather rent everything by paying a monthly subscription. And to think it all started with Napster and the iPod. Now, Netflix doesn't share Spotify's variable cost structure, but it too faces similar structural challenges to its model. Undoubtedly, both leading players would like to change their fundamental economics, and Spotify even tried that at one point. Do you remember in 2014 when it raised its monthly subscription from $10 to $13 to cover Apple's 30% toll? But Apple later launched Apple Music at a conniving and predatory $10 a month, and Spotify retreated back to its sauna or wherever Swedish people go when they're sad. Perhaps not so shocking then that Spotify's price point in the US is the same today as it was when it launched in July 2011. Even after COVID-19 caused inflation to skyrocket, it's still only $9.99 per month? Something's gotta give, right? Although you can still get a hot dog from Costco for only $1.50, and I'm not mad about that. So I guess it all evens out in the end. When it comes to music though, consumers seem to be the only winners here. We can all now enjoy the entire world of music. Over 100 billion songs anytime, anywhere, and on any device. All of this power ad-free for $9.99 a month. Although in my case, that $9.99 basically goes to playing Taylor Swift albums on repeat, so despite having every song ever to choose from, Spotify is making a killing off of Swifties like myself. But just think about that. Unlimited listening to over 100 billion songs for just a bit less than one Starbucks coffee. It's an incredible bargain and an unmistakable value proposition. The amount pales to the joy we feel, and the blood, sweat, tears, and creativity, not to mention livelihoods of the artists behind it all. And now that I think about it, $120 a year is quite the bargain for Spotify Wrapped to tell me, with authority, that I'm in the top 0.1% of Taylor Swift listeners. If only Spotify sent out plaques for that like YouTube does with their play buttons. Even so, with all of that power in your pocket, significant numbers of consumers are still miffed at paying anything at all. Technology in the form of Napster and the internet, and then Apple's iPod and Apple Music, ultimately forever transform the perception of music's value. Kind of like when I was trying to become a film composer in LA a while back, and every up-and-coming director wanted to pay me in exposure rather than actual dollars. Oh, okay. Your perception is that your artistic talents are more important than mine. I see. And tech's latest disruptive force of generative artificial intelligence is likely to do the same. AI can, and already does, spit out endless streams of new songs without sleeping, eating, and payment of any kind, after the initial infrastructure investments have been made. Why pay me to write a film score when AI can look at every John Williams score from the past and write the next Star Wars or E.T. or Jurassic Park or Harry Potter soundtrack? Okay, faced with these sobering realities, what can artists do? First, musicians, and all creators for that matter, should simply learn, understand, and internalize these new threats and realities. How does that saying go? You're only afraid of what you don't understand? Don't beat a dead gift horse in the mouth. Something like that. Second, artists should acknowledge that those forces are here to stay and cannot simply be sued out of existence, which was the preferred method of the RIAA when first faced with the Napster problem. Lars Ulrich from Metallica can tell you how well that worked. Third, rather than fight new tech and transformed economic realities, artists should learn to leverage new tech as best they can to empower new possibilities. Yes, technology certainly threatens, but technology can also empower and open new doors of possibilities. Don't fight fire with fire, wear a suit made of asbestos and understand the nature of fire on this planet as a means of rebirth and cleansing of the land. Streaming, at least theoretically, enables musicians to build a global audience and community with deeper ongoing engagement. Yes, the streamers themselves add only pennies to the bottom line, but artists now have new tools to deploy to reach out and monetize their fans, and it only takes small numbers to drive bigger numbers. This is the famous 1,000 true fan theory that describes the monetizing power of fandom even at small numbers. If those superfans pay only $100 a year to support their favorite artist, that's $100,000 right there. I'm not saying it's easy, but this is the creative community's reality. But let's go back to what many still consider the villain in this story, Spotify. Faced with its daunting realities, sure, it could finally raise its monthly pricing. But price hikes certainly come with their own risks and likely would scare off large numbers of users, many of whom might go back to theft. The more obvious answer is that Spotify ultimately must sell. Try as it has, the streamer has yet to significantly monetize anything other than the music itself. And pure play business models in the world of content, including Netflix on the video side, simply can't compete against big tech competitors Google, YouTube, Apple, and Amazon. All of those behemoths use content as marketing. YouTube drives more Google ad revenues, Apple drives more sales of iPhones and Macs, and Amazon drives more commerce. Only an acquisition of Spotify will make investors happy. But even then, artists understandably won't be. Maybe the industry needs to take a harder look at Apple. Or maybe, just maybe, there is some logic behind that Instagram model who spends the time to take 90 selfies before landing on that perfect shot because she does it for her super fans. Because she's a digital content creator, an artist in her own right. Nah, that still doesn't require any talent whatsoever. Who am I kidding? And now it's your turn. Would you stick with Spotify if they raise their prices again, or would you jump ship? And Spotify keeps promising high-res audio coming soon. Is that ever gonna come out? Let's start a conversation in the comments below. As always, to keep up on all things hi-fi and audio, computers, gadgets, and emerging tech, head over to ecoustics.com for so much information. And don't forget to follow us on social media for even more bite-sized content while on the go. Until next time, I'm Elon Osborne, and I have acoustically spoken.